So, one of the most important aspects of Kant is putting this categorical imperative, this very, very general principle, into practice. Right? What he calls the practical imperative. Right? And it's the second formulation of the categorical imperative. Right? The first formulation, which we've already gone over, an act is moral if and only if the principle it embodies is capable of universalization without self-contradiction, right? That's the first formulation, and that's to get us into the mindset of what the categorical imperative and the moral rules that follow out of it must be, right? In general. Now, as they apply in practice, this is where we get Kant's notion of dignity and the goodwill from, right? So the second formulation of the categorical imperative says that says to act so as to treat in your own person as well as anyone else always as an end and never merely as a means. Right? So this ends mean language might sound familiar, right? Outside of this context, it is familiar, right? We talk about, treating people, treating certain things as a means toward an end, right? That's a common phrase. It's a mean toward towards our ends, right? Meaning it's a stepping stone along the path, or we're using them as a tool to get to where we want to go, our particular end, right? Now, in the context of ethics and morality, what's being said is that an end is going to be uh, not treating someone instrumentally. It's treated that way. Treating something as an end is treating it for its own sake, treating it on its own terms. It is its own thing, right? And deserving of respect, functionally. Treating something as a means is treating someone instrumentally, or someone or something instrumentally, right? Using it for some further purpose. Right? When we treat someone as an end, we treat them as an end alone, right? What we're doing is we're treating them, on their own terms. We're not using them for some further purpose or considering them for some in terms of some further design. We're considering them as they are, or considering it as it is, because we can apply treating a situation as an ends to itself. Now, this is particularly important because it deals with, in morality, because it deals with people. Right? What this means, essentially, this quote, is to always treat people first and foremost as people, and never simply using them as tools towards a further goal of yours. Right? Hence why the modifier merely is important. Right? Because inevitably we're going to treat people as tools towards our goals to an extent, right? But so long as we also first and foremost treat them as people, then that instrumental using them as means towards some other end isn't strictly immoral, right? And we'll get into that in just a bit. All right. So this idea that we should treat people as people is the cornerstone of Kant's notion of dignity, that all people have equal moral worth and are worthy of equal moral status. And we can actually quibble over that, right? We can think about whether or not consistent actions or personality traits make people less worthy of moral status. Like being a pedophile or a rapist or a murderer, right? A serial killer. Kant's view on it is that everyone's equal, worthy of equal moral status as people, right? But that doesn't mean that because people have the same moral worth, right? just by dint of being human. But that's not to say that an individual has this. We need to have the same moral regard for a particular individual who consistently does heinous things. Right? Now, according to Kant, what moves one to act morally, right, to abide by this view of dignity, is the sense of duty that reason determines in knowing the categorical imperative, right, in knowing through reason what right and wrong are. And the will that acts from duty, right, from simply this knowledge, is the good will, right? And the goodwill is the only thing, according to Kant, that is unqualifiedly good in itself. Right? So this leads us to three ways of describing duty, or two ways of describing duty. Right? We can talk about acting from duty, right? Which is when we do the right thing simply because it's the right thing, right? Simply because reason tells us to, not for any externally motivated reason as well. So this is when our actions purely embody the goodwill. And then we can also act according to duty. And this is when we do the right thing based off of habit, inclination, whimsy, or some external motivation. All right. So what we're doing is still right, but we're not doing it simply because reason tells us it's the right thing to do. We're doing it for other reasons, right? We're doing it for more selfish or self-serving reasons, or perhaps for no reason at all, right? In the case of just acting on habit or whimsy. And so these are the two ways in which we can abide by duty and do things correctly according to Kant. But what about, how does this relate to assigning moral worth or how we morally judge individuals? Well, according to Kant, there are three ways to assign praise and blame. Two of them connect up with acting from duty and acting according to duty, and the other one has to do with, acting against duty. So the person who acts against duty, who doesn't do what reason tells him to, or, doesn't do what's right, basically, is wrong and blameworthy for their actions, right? Because whatever they do, if it's against reason, it's wrong. So they're acting against duty. It's just morally wrong. When we act in accord with duty, right, or according to duty, right, that is, when we do what is right for some reason other than just the fact that it's right, right? For some external motivation or from habit or what have you, then the person is right morally, but they're not praiseworthy for doing what's right. Because, again, their motivations are selfish or lazy or rooted in something, some external motivation, right? Rather than the internal motivation that should be provided just from the knowledge that this is right. And finally, when we act from duty, we are acting right, we're doing what's right, and we are praiseworthy for it, right? So there's a certain irony here that the one who is most praiseworthy for doing what is right is the one who is least concerned with the praise, right? A certain irony, at least in the way Kant has constructed it, in terms of like its relationship to, again, his Christian upbringing, his strict Calvinist upbringing. It's one that makes sense, right? Because doing what's right, one shouldn't, in Christian doctrine, one shouldn't do what's right and take pride in doing that. Because pride is one of the sins, right? One should be humble and do it in God's grace, right? And as an act, in emulation of God's grace. So you can still see, even this far into his ethics, that influence of thought of his Christian upbringing and his own thinking. But again, God isn't necessary for his morality, right? For his deontological ethics, right and wrong just are right and wrong, right? And it's something that any being capable of reason can come to know. God, being all-knowing, just does know it, right? Hence the Ten Commandments, right? They're kind of like shortcuts towards doing what's right, according to Kant, right? But we should still let reason reveal these things to us, and abide by reason first and foremost. Okay.